All right, 1 Samuel 14, Jonathan, that's where we're at. And last week we intentionally left it on a cliffhanger, right? Where did we leave off? Well, Jonathan, who we know to be a man of great faith, has decided, I want to see if God wants to do something today. He looks over at his armor bearer. It's just the two of them. And he woke up that day thinking, what about me? What about today? I know that God can do anything he wants, however he wants, through whoever he wants. But he didn't receive a direct word from the Lord about anything in particular. He just said, I want to see if God wants to do something today through us. So he devised a little plan. Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Jump right into the text just to be reminded of what this little plan was that he had with his armor bearer. Verse 6 is where we'll pick up for context. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. And it may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, by many or by few. And his armor bearer said to him, do all this that is in your heart, do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul. Then Jonathan said, behold, we'll cross over to the men and we'll show ourselves to them. If they say to us, wait until we come to you, then we'll stand still in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we'll go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be the sign to us. And we left off here, verse 11, the first part. So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. I kind of just see them kind of peeking up over this rock here, because they had to climb up to this spot. So they kind of slowly showed themselves to this group of Philistines. Now, one of the things you hear me say a lot, and it's kind of echoed, well, it's said in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, but I always say God doesn't look for the strongest, God doesn't look for the wisest, God doesn't look for the best looking, God looks for the willing. All those other things he doesn't need, he looks for the willing. All God needs is a heart that is willing to say yes. All he needs is a heart that is willing to trust him. What we saw last week is that Jonathan trusted the Lord. Jonathan was the type of person to say yes to the Lord no matter what. If God were to ask him to do something, this is a heart that says yes. But here is a heart that's so for God that he's like, you know what? What if God might do something? What if God might want to do something incredible today? Outmatched in every way from an earthly perspective. None of that mattered to Jonathan because he knew it wasn't him. Before his leap of faith, he said what? Perhaps the Lord will do something. Perhaps the Lord will do something. But also notice, one of the things I'm going to point out to you today is that doesn't mean that Jonathan just sat there either. That's what Saul was doing, right? Saul was hanging out under a pomegranate tree, just waiting. There are those that might even say the right words but have Saul's behavior. Oh, let's see if the Lord wants to do something. And they don't lift a finger. No, Jonathan says, perhaps the Lord will do something, and then he gets off of his rear end and goes to see. Faith gets off of its rear end. Sometimes he has to go do something. With his faith, he had hope. We said he didn't have a direct word from God. We compared him to Gideon last week. I'm not going to go back into that because it took a long time to offer the comparison, but I felt it to be important to do so. We compared him to Gideon to show that they're nothing alike. Jonathan knew not only can the Lord do whatever he wants, he can do it however he wants. Jonathan didn't think highly of himself. It's not like he got up that day and said, God needs my help, or let me go see what I can do. He said, no, let's go see if the Lord wants to do something. This had nothing to do with arrogance. Jonathan thought highly of the Lord. That's the true nature of faith. Trusting God and believing he can do it. He says, nothing can hinder the Lord in verse 6. When Abraham wondered about God, what did God say to him? Genesis 18:14. He looks at him and says, is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. I got to share great news with you today. Someone we had been praying for, now pregnant. Is anything too hard for the Lord? No. No. Romans 4:21 is about Abe. And what does it say? Fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. That's what Paul says about Abe. That Abe was fully convinced that God was able to do what he promised. Jonathan was fully convinced that God was able. We'll stop there because nothing was promised to him. All right? He did trust, of course, that God would do all that he had promised, but in this case, he had no specific promise he was clinging to. So Jonathan was fully convinced that God was able. And that's beautiful all by itself, isn't it? That our God is able to do exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever ask or imagine, the New Testament says. That's the God we serve. That's the God Jonathan knew. And he didn't even have the whole Bible to tell him that. He didn't have a direct promise that he was leaning on, but he knew who God was. And he knew who he was. He knew, I'm part of God's people. I'm a part of his promised people. And I know that when his people are doing what he wants them to do, he does incredible things on their behalf. So no matter the odds, Jonathan knew God was bigger than all of them. And because of who God was, again, Jonathan knew God could do whatever he wanted with and through whomever he wanted to do it. He knew that God could do the same thing with 2 as 200. For he knew, again, verse 6, nothing can hinder the Lord. This morning we're going to talk a little bit about the other guy that's there, though. The armor bearer, the unsung, unnamed hero. Verse 7 is powerful. It records the response of the armor bearer. As we said last week, every major officer in the Israelite army would have had an assistant known as an armor bearer. And the armor bearer would help the officer in fighting and administration, right? We know that now. They would often carry the armor, the weapons, all that, hence the name, right? This guy, we don't get his name, we just get his title, or what his job. But he trusted Jonathan, and more importantly, he trusted Jonathan's God. He trusted in the Lord. He's not in a position of authority. He's not in a position of authority where the choice can be made by him, but his response, when given the opportunity to do something great for the Lord, is equally as incredible as Jonathan's. He says, do all that is in your heart. I'm with you, heart and soul. I told you, every time I think of the armor bearer, I think of you. I love when God knits people's hearts together like this. It's hard to describe the supernatural unity of those who agree to trust God together. Those who agree to trust God to do big things in them and through them, despite what it looks like. Despite the odds. Not to mention, it always feels good when we have someone alongside of us who believes in us, who believes in what we're doing, who encourages us, who shares our vision, our heart. This armor bearer shows us all kinds of things. First, we see that no one, no matter how great, from an earthly perspective, no one achieves great things for the kingdom alone. It not only feels good to have people beside us, but it's also necessary. We need people beside us working with us for the Lord. Kingdom business is not a solo effort. Paul said we need each other. First, for encouragement. I'm going to throw some New Testament verses at you. Paul says we need each other for encouragement. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Therefore, encourage one another. Build one another up, just as you are doing. And I didn't even add that part. He said that part. But what's true in Thessalonica is true here. Encourage one another. Build one another up, just as you are doing each and every week. Continue to do that. We need each other for motivation and fellowship. Hebrews 10:24-25 says this. Let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So we need one another for motivation and fellowship. This particular verse is famous for the reminder that it offers that we have to be together, that we have to be meeting on a regular basis. This is the go-to be in church kind of passage. We can't be there for each other if we're not there for each other, physically speaking, right? We need each other. Literally speaking, but once we are together, what are we to do when we gather? Well, we stir one another up to love. We stir one another up to do good works. And encourage each other. Notice that's in both verses, because we need it. We need it because life does beat us down. And he says, all the more as you see the day drawing near. What day? The day. The day we're all waiting for. The day when he comes for us or we go to him. And until that day comes, what do? We gather, we encourage, we stir one another up. We need each other to help one another through difficulty. Galatians 6:2. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. We don't need practical armor bearers. I don't have somebody to carry my armor. I don't have armor, although that would be kind of cool. But I won't do that. I won't embarrass you, I promise. But I do need you to help me carry my burdens when I can't carry them on my own. You need me, I need you. We need each other. We also need each other for accountability. Hebrews 3:13 says this, exhort one another every day as long as it is called today. That's one of my favorite lines. It feels very Paul-ish, but we don't know if Paul wrote this. But he says, exhort one another every day as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. That's a powerful verse. I mean, they all are, but this one is kind of, basically saying every day that ends in Y, we need each other, and one of the things we need each other for is to insulate one another from the deceitfulness of sin. Sin is tricksy. It's tricky. Because how many times have we convinced ourselves to do something we know we shouldn't have, but we convinced ourselves that we needed to do it? Or we convinced ourselves it's not that bad. That's the deceitfulness of sin. When sin deceives you, when your flesh deceives you into thinking it's not that big a deal. Or, I heard some famous pastors that are kind of swept up in scandal within the last year or so. And one of the things that they were saying is, I didn't do it, but if I did do it, I'd just ask God for forgiveness anyway. And I was like, that's a strange thing to say. I didn't do it. I didn't do that awful sexual immorality I'm being accused of, but even if I did, I would just ask God for forgiveness anyway. Amen? And I'm like, yeah, but now you got me wondering, because if I didn't think you did it before, I got to thinking you did it. The deceitfulness of sin. Sin is tricky. Your flesh is tricky. Because it's going to deceive you into thinking, again, it's not that big a deal. Oh, God's just going to forgive you anyway. He understands. That's the deceitfulness of sin. Practically speaking, one person can't do everything. Nor are they gifted to do everything. I told you on Wednesday that was one of the things that we kind of talked about. Ministerial philosophy, my heart for the church in the future. Whatever the Lord does with us. There are certain things that's like, hey, I'm open to this. There are other things I'm like, well, maybe we shouldn't do this because I shouldn't wear that many hats in your life. I don't want to do everything. I can't. God has gifted you differently than He's gifted me, but it's also not the Nelly show. And I know right now, because we're small, it does appear as though I wear a lot of hats. And I do. Some of that is out of necessity. Some of it is like, oh, this guy's on the worship team and he's preaching. Who does he think he is? I just like singing with my friends. But if that was ever a stumbling block to anybody, I'd be like, well, okay. Do you not want me? I want to be faithful with all my gifts. I want to be faithful with all my gifts. And as long as I can still sing a note, I'm going to do it. So, it's not, just let me be clear, it's not that I feel like I need to be the one up here doing everything or being the, no, that's not at all. It's just I'm trying to model faithfulness with all the things that God has given me. And I want you to do the same. But I can't do everything. I'm not gifted to do everything. We're going to be doing things in the future. And God is we already have some of the people right now that are going to lead those things as God gives you ideas and vision. But then there are going to be other people that God brings that are going to be gifted in other ways. And it's just going to be interesting to see. People say, well, what's your 5-year plan? It's like, I ain't even got a 5-day plan right now. I'm about the next 5 hours. If I can get through the next 5 hours, I'll be all right. Yeah. I'm on that 5-hour plan right now in 2025. I'm on the 5-hour plan. I'm going 5 hours at a time into this new year. But practically speaking, none of us can do everything, nor did God intend for us to do that. God has given us different gifts, different people, and different measures as well, so that we can all help one another and complement one another to achieve things for His glory, a variety of things. Not every church has to look the same. I always say unity does not mean uniformity. We're going to do some things that other churches never thought of. And there's other things that everybody's going to be doing, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Well, why? Because I can't defend it biblically, or I just think it's dumb. Because I don't like leaning on tradition for tradition's sake, so we're not going to do that. Oh, okay. I was talking to a guy I met recently. He's a believer, part of another denomination, but still brothers in Christ. And we were just talking about certain things, like, oh, we do it this way and we do it that way. He's like, well, why do you do it that way? I said, well, because I don't want anything to become vain repetition. Jesus said to beware of that kind of stuff. So again, God has given different people, different gifts, in varying measures. Check this out, because there's a passage that talks exactly about all of this. It's going to say it better than I can. Romans 12, 4-8. And it'll sound really familiar as soon as you hear it. For as in one body we have many members, the members do not all have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Did you hear that? Members of one another. Verse 6. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving. The one who teaches, in his teaching. The one who exhorts, in his exhortation. The one who contributes in generosity. The one who leads with zeal. The one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. I mean, that could be a sermon all by itself, but we don't have time to look at all of it. But you see, God gives different things to different people, so that we might complement one another. All of us, all can't be the hands. That's creepy. Imagine somebody covered in hands. You're like, ew, that's gross, that's gross. Imagine somebody that was all feet. Ugh, that's even grosser. My sister, my baby sister, she's not a baby anymore. She's going to get married in May. But she hates feet, especially toes. So every once in a while, I'll send her a toe with a little face on it. It's the most big brother thing I've ever done to her. But imagine just covered in feet. That's gross. That's weird, right? We all can't be the eyes. We all can't be the ears, right? Just as our body are made up of many members, Paul says, so too is the body of Christ. It's not that certain people can't do similar things. I got 2 ears, so there may be some parallel in the things that we do, some overlap, but we all have different gifts, different ideas, and that's only going to continue to grow and change, and I'm excited about that. I'm open for that as the Lord leads. Now, some may be thinking, as I say, this is not a solo effort. Nobody can do this on their own. We shouldn't do it on our own. You might be thinking of some rebuttals. If you're cynical like me, I know I did. Maybe you're thinking, well, what about Samson, right? Didn't he do a bunch of solo stuff? Now, I want you to pause and think about that for a second. Samson should rarely ever be used as an example for anything positive. Samson's a hot mess. Now, I'm not saying you can never use him, because even the Bible uses him. Shockingly. To me, it's shocking that he's in Hebrews 11. Because his life was such a shipwreck. But he's there in the Hall of Faith. But because of the debauched life that he lived, he should rarely be used as an example of something positive. He was supernaturally empowered by God to do unique things in a unique time for a unique purpose. So it's not a model for us to follow. Not to mention the time that it takes place, the time of the judges. Is that a period of time that's meant for great examples? Not so much. Even the guy Gideon that we talked about last week. He did succeed. He had a great victory. But then dude started sweating his own press. Oh, I should make a statue to me. I did a great job. No kidding. Go read it. He becomes a creep. So the time of the judges is infamous for everyone doing, the author says, what is right in their own eyes. Everyone's going around doing what was right in their own eyes. And Samson epitomizes that sentiment. A highly arrogant and compromised man that God often used in spite of Samson, not because of Samson. He's a tragic life, not one seen to follow. What about Elijah? That's somebody else's. Well, he was solo, right? He did incredible things by himself that no one else would do, and I wouldn't disagree with that. This further proves that God can do by many or by few. Even just one person that says yes to God, he can do incredible things, even if just one person is willing to take a risk for his glory and honor. Elijah did do mighty things. But let me ask you this, if you know anything about his life, was flying solo ideal? He didn't fly solo because he wanted to. It's because the people around him were awful. His people were in rebellion against God. Living in the Pacific Northwest, are there Christians just sprawling around everywhere? No. So when you meet another one in the wild, it's kind of like finding water in the desert, right? That's why when I met I met up with a guy for a Facebook Marketplace thing. I was selling some stuff, and he starts asking. He sees I have the big old dancing toaster thing on the side of my truck, and he was like, what is that? And I start talking about the podcast. He goes, "What, are you a Christian?" I go, "Yeah, I actually, started a church up here." And he goes, "Oh, I'm a Christian too." And we talked in 32-degree weather for like 30 minutes before I was like, "Can we have coffee on a different day because it's cold?" And I know both of us have places that we got to be. But flying solo is not ideal. Before we knew you guys, before we had you guys, oh my gosh, was it scary and miserable and dark. We were surrounded by people. So to have hundreds of people and then to come up and have no one, oh man, that was abrupt. That was hard. So when I say we're grateful to you, you have no idea just how much. Elijah did do incredible things, but flying solo is not the ideal. God himself said to Adam in Genesis 2:18, what? It is not good that man be alone. Now you say, wasn't that for romance? No, not just for romantic involvement. No. This describes the deep need for humans to be connected. That goes beyond romance. You got to be connected with other people. Even those of you that might be a little bit like, for me, my list of my people, that list is a very short list. Even as the Lord grows the fellowship, my heart will always make room for other people. But there will always be something unique about what is here right now. Now some might hear that and be offended. But it just is what it is. Those that were with you when there was nothing. Those who were with you through that, man, that's incredible. If you know anything about Elijah, you know that even after doing these incredible things, well, not just before and after. He did a lot, but before and after this thing happens. But he was alone, and he suffered great depression, partly because of that. If you didn't know that, Elijah, one of the mightiest men of God in the Bible, he suffered from depression. He fled in the middle of nowhere and asked God, just take me out. Just kill me. Some say, well, there's no depression in the Bible. So, when you go out in the middle of nowhere and ask God to kill you, that's pretty sad. So I don't know what else to call it. It got dark. It's in 1 Kings 19, verses 4-7. I'm just going to read it. It says, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. He asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord. Just take away my life. I'm no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under the broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank. And he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. He said to him, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So he departed from there and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him. And he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by and cast his cloak upon him. So, excuse the lengthy read, but He has this incredible victory against the prophets of Baal and against Jezebel, and afterwards he gets afraid, and it gets really dark because he runs out into the middle of nowhere, sits under a tree, and asks God to kill him. And what did God do? God gave Elijah a meal, a nap, and a friend. Never underestimate the power of a nap, a meal, and a friend. We are at our best when we are working together for his honor and his glory. We need each other. Elijah isn't the only prophet that felt alone. Or maybe was actually alone. Not just felt alone, but legitimately alone. Because sometimes you can be surrounded by people and yet still feel alone. When genuine connection is missing. When they are by themselves, that speaks more to the awful condition of the people around them, but rarely are they alone for long in most cases. But our friend, the armor bearer, reeling it back in, he shows us something else. It's not enough to have people, right? Again, the prophets were surrounded by people, but the people were uncommitted. Wasn't that the problem? That's what Elijah, in his complaint to the Lord, he said, I'm the only one that wants to serve you. Everyone else has turned against you. But what did he tell him? While he was in his feelings, he said, nobody's following you but me. And what did God tell him? Actually, Elijah, 7,000 have not bowed the knee to Baal. And one of them I'm going to send your way, Elisha, and he's going to be your successor. 7,000. Sometimes I whine about it a lot. The rarity of Christians up here, right? But the fact that even the fact that there are so many here says they're out there. So we can say, oh Lord, there's nobody here. It's like, well, no, that's not true. When we're in our feelings, don't we get unreasonable? Don't we come to conclusions that are not the truth? Right? Our feelings are not always true. I'm not saying your feelings aren't real. I'm saying they're not always true. They're not always based in reality. Because I'm just being vulnerable with you. Even there are times in which the enemy attacks me and that depression wants to climb across my bald head and crush me again. And it's like claws coming up and just wanting to swallow me whole. And those feelings of loneliness, and then Sunday breaks. And I see you guys and I'm reminded, I'm not alone. Our friend the armor bearer again was a real one. You guys are real ones. You need people, but they got to be like-minded. They got to share your heart and commitment, and this guy did. We all got to be going in the same direction. We don't all have to be the same. Please don't be. Please don't be like me. We're all working to be more like Jesus. We're all going in the same direction toward Jesus. Not everybody has to be in the same place in their walk. Not everyone has to be in the same place in their knowledge, in their life. But we all got to have our eyes fixed on the same thing, Jesus. We all have to be walking in the same direction with Jesus. There's, of course, a famous verse from Amos 3:3, and I always like hearing it in the King Jimmy. Can two walk together lest they be agreed? How can two walk together unless they agree, right? But as we walk together, any of us can walk together as long as we agree on where we're going, as long as we agree on who we're following. We're following Jesus. The New Testament encourages a deep sense of unity and single-mindedness. What I described earlier is having our hearts knit together in purpose. Paul wanted this for the church. Philippians 2:2 says what? Complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. So, again, we're encouraged by the New Testament to seek unity and single-mindedness. Doesn't mean we're a cult and we all agree and we all say the same thing. Like, man, cults creep me out. We're going to start talking about cults a lot on doing something separate with diving into those and what they believed and what they did. But it's not about us marching in lockstep and repeating the same thing. I when I was a teacher at the academy and they would have the little kids stand up and they'd all repeat the same thing. Some people thought that was cute. I was like, that's some Children of the Corn stuff right now. I didn't like it. Okay, everyone repeat the same thing. And again, they're kids, it's cute, ha ha. But I was like, no. We're not all going to look the same, sound the same, act the same. That's not what it's saying. But again, our hearts are together. We have the same goal, and that is honoring God. That's finding out what he wants us to do on this side of heaven and doing it, both individually and corporately. There's things that God is going to ask you to do for the church. There are things that God is going to ask you to do as an individual. And my job as your pastor is I want to help you succeed in both. I want to help you pursue both with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength as you pursue Christ. My wife and I, our first big step was when I came home one day and I said, I think God wants me to quit my big job and go work for him at the church and at the weird school they have. And I think he wants me to do it full time. And her response, I told you, was just like the armor bearer. You should do all that's in your heart. Behold, I'm with you, heart and soul. And last week in our study, I bragged about all of you. I don't get to complain. I don't get to quit because no matter how bad things look at times, I'm surrounded by people that are like this armor bearer. So with the support of his armor bearer at his side, Jonathan says, this is what we're going to do, right? He says, behold, we're going to cross over to the men. We're going to show ourselves to them. And if they say, wait there, we're going to stay put. We're not going to go in. And verse 10, he says, but if they say, come up to us, then we'll go, for the Lord has given them into our hand. That'll be our sign, right? They'd already decided they were going to take a step of faith, but they would only do it with the Lord's guidance. Jonathan wants to know if God wanted to do something through him. So he proposed that test. It wasn't to test God. It was to determine if God wanted to do anything through him. Many times for those that offer conditions, it's because they're battling doubts of some kind. Jonathan didn't doubt God for a second. He simply wanted to know if God wanted to do something then and there with him. So they showed themselves to the Philistine guards. It says if they say, we're going to come to you, okay. But if they say come up, it's go time. Jonathan was showing wisdom, not demonstrating unbelief. That was the whole Jonathan-Gideon comparison last week. We said, don't be like Gideon. If you know God is telling you to do something, don't sit there and say, will you give me a sign? That's insulting. That's an expression of unbelief. But if, like Jonathan, you have a desire to take a risk for his glory, or you're trying to determine how to live out your faith in him, you can ask him for guidance and even confirmation. In this instance, he hasn't received a confirmed word. He's acting on faith, not anything specific. He's being guided by his faith in God's power and God's goodness, and he's led by hope and a strong sense in his heart that not only can God do it today, but God might want to do it right now through me. He doesn't assume, though. He throws out the litmus test, and that's humble. It's humble, beautiful faith. Humble enough to say, you know what, my heart might be wrong. I might really want to do this deep down, but it might not be God's timing. That's important too. But all of it was prompted by faith. Since he didn't receive that direct instruction, God, I know you can. What about me? What about today, right? So God honors his faith. We finally got to, I know you've been waiting like, well, what the heck happens? Well, now let's see how his plan plays out, shall we? It says, so both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, look, Hebrews, they're coming out of the holes where they've hidden themselves. And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us and we'll show you a thing or two. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel today. Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. So you got one, he's like knocking him over, and the other one's stabbing him down. This is cutthroat. And that first strike which Jonathan and his armor bearer made killed about 20 men, within it as were half a furrow's length in an acre of land. So they're going in, and you got one that's like, 20 guys like that. They shock them. In verse 15, and there was panic in the camp and in the field and among all the people. The garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. So remember that many of the Israelites had gone into hiding back in chapter 13. Many of them had gone into hiding. They were hiding in cisterns and caves and holes, like they were that afraid of the Philistine forces. So they're saying to themselves, like, hey, I see some Hebrews. Must be some more deserters. Must be some more of them Israelite deserters. And I purposely said more deserters. That's going to matter more. Remember that. In verse 12, they start talking smack. But that smack talk is exactly what Jonathan was waiting for. Those were the exact words that he was looking for, that he had asked God for. Those of you that know my personal story that I won't get into too much because of the feet, but God, if this is your will, let these exact words come out of their mouth. Some of you know the story behind that, and God honored that. Well, now you know where I got it from. So those were the words that he was looking for. He asked God, God, if they call us up, that's how I know you're going to be with me. And that Philistine said the magic words. Oh, come on up here. We'll show you a thing or two. Oh, he's like, it's on. And I love, this is a powerful picture of God's sovereignty. This Philistine hates God. This Philistine is an enemy of God. But God is in control of this whole thing. He directs the very words that come out of the mouth of this pagan to be exactly what Jonathan needed to hear. To let him know, I'm going to bless you today. I'm going to do something through you today. Never forget that God, the God we know, the God we serve, is in control of all things. His power, his reach, his resources, limitless. And like I told you at the beginning, he's not looking for the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the smartest. He's looking for the willing. And once he has someone willing to say yes and trust him, that person has all the power and resources of heaven at their disposal. This is doubly true for Christians today. We have something Jonathan, David, Elijah, Moses, none of them had. What is that? The indwelling of the Holy Spirit. We have the Holy Spirit dwelling inside of us. The Bible tells us that this is the very power that raised Christ from the dead, and it now abides in us. If these men were able to do the feats that they did, imagine what Spirit-filled Christians can do when they trust it. Got to be willing. Got to be willing to be used. You also got to be willing to look stupid. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'm just being raw with you. You got to be willing to look stupid. You got to be willing to rock the boat a little bit. Because those that aren't doing anything won't like you. I know about that too. Jonathan, he hears the Philistines say, come up here, I'll show you a thing or two, right? And Jonathan gets pumped because he knows that God is going to be with him. He doesn't know what's going to happen yet. He doesn't know fully how this is going to unfold. But he doesn't need to. He just needed to know, God, you're going to be with me. And I know that if you're going to be with me, I'll go. And Jonathan and his armor bearer, they again made up their mind. And they made their way up to the Philistine soldiers. And I want to add, that wasn't easy. Subtle detail. It's not, you gotta look closely at it. But they had to climb up to. One of the hardest truths to swallow in all of this is just because God is in something doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I hate that. I wish it was like, well, God, if you told me that it's what you want me to do, then that means you're going to open every door and you're going to smooth the lane for me. No. No, and I told you that the path is the point, not the destination. Because it's through the path that he takes you through that you become the man or the woman that he needs you to be once you get there. So they had to work. They had to climb. This was hard. Jonathan was given the Lord's blessing for the attack, but he still had to climb up there with both hands and feet. My family, God's work is hard work, but it's the only work worth doing. It's the only work worth anything. And by that, I don't mean, well, just ministry, that's all that matters. No. The work that God has called you to be a light and be the salt and light of the world, that's part of the work. And it's hard work, but it's the only work worth doing. It has eternal value. When Jonathan and his armor bearer made their way up, they start owning the Philistines. I told you, it's kind of like one is hitting them, the other is running them through. And before you know it, 20 guys, they've taken out 20 soldiers. And then what happens? It says the earth quaked. It says that the earth quaked. I believe that it's clear that God shook the earth on their behalf. Some will look at it and say, well, it's suddenly all these people start running and that's what caused the shaking. Okay, if that makes you feel better. But being that there's all kinds of earthquakes in the Bible, is it really that big of a stretch to say that God shook the earth? No, he does it all the time. Because he can. So Jonathan and his armor bearer, they did their part, and guess what? God showed up and he was doing his. Jonathan could use his heart and his sword, and he did. But what Jonathan couldn't do was send an earthquake that would rock every Philistine to their core. But God could do that, and he did. Oftentimes, we wait around for God to do what we can do. But God will often do miracles, what he alone can do, if we will do what we can do. Right? Don't sit around waiting for the parts that you can do. There are many things that are simple that we can be doing. Can you save a person's soul? No, you can't do that part. That's out of your control. But can you show them kindness? Can you be respectful? Can you be loving to them? Can you open your lips and share the gospel with them? Those are the things that you can do. Are you doing all that you can do before saying, God, do what you do? You gotta ask yourself that. Now let's keep going around. I'm never going to finish because I get too excited about Jonathan. Verse 16. The watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. So they see all this commotion happening in the horizon. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, count and see who has gone out from us. And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were missing. So Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of God here. For the ark of God went at that time with the people of Israel. Verse 19. Now while Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into battle. And behold, every Philistine's sword was against his fellow, and there was great confusion. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before, I'm going to read that again. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time, and who had gone up with them into the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and with Jonathan. Likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country and in the caves of Ephraim, they heard the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them into battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle pressed beyond Bethaven. Lot just happened there. Final stretch. So Saul's lookout is watching. He's watching. He said, wait a minute. All of a sudden, the Philistines are dispersing all over the place. In verse 16, they can't figure out why. So they start looking around. They're like, well, who left here to go stir them up? Like, what happened? Who's missing? So they did a roll call to figure out who was missing in verse 17. To me, this just shows the ineptitude of Saul's leadership. My guy, does it matter who's there and who's not right now? You see this tumult. You have this amazing opportunity. The enemy is fleeing. They're freaking out. They're scattering. This is a perfect time for you to go in and finish them off. And you want to take attendance? Knowing Saul like we do, this is my opinion. I can't prove it, but it's my opinion. You may share it. You may disagree. I think it's his pride. I'm thinking like, well, who left? Who went out without my permission? Who's going to go take the credit from me? That's what I think. They realized the only ones that were missing, Jonathan and his armor bearer. Just two guys. In verse 18 and 19, Saul calls the priest. He calls the priest forward, and you say, oh, well, good for Saul. He finally learned his lesson. Call the priest before doing anything stupid. No. This is the wrong time now. Back then, remember the whole sacrifice thing? That was the time for you to call a priest, and you didn't. You didn't do it when you were supposed to do it. Now you want to do it now when it's business time? This guy's a mess. He calls the priest. They were going to try and consult with the Lord in the midst of this chaos to find out what to do next. Some translations say that they called for the ephod. Others say they called for the ark. Either way, Saul is trying to look and sound spiritual now because of what he got in trouble for earlier. He should have called the priest. He didn't. Now, it's not time to call the priest. It's not time for a prayer meeting, Saul. It's time for a fight. The guy that wouldn't consult God before now suddenly decides in the middle of a battle breaking out, he wants to call a prayer meeting. Bad timing, my guy. He lacks discernment. We got to be led by the Spirit, folks. And we can be, most certainly, as believers. Have you ever been like Saul? I know I have. There have been times where God said to do something, and I'll pray about it. Don't use something spiritual to cover up disobedience. If you know God is saying you do something, don't say, I'm going to pray about it. That's the Christianese to get out of doing what we're supposed to sometimes. Not that you shouldn't pray, but again, there are times in which we use as an excuse to not do what we know we should. But then there are probably times when you jumped ahead. And God was like, hey, did you plan on asking me what I thought about this? There's a time to pray and a time to go do. Once the Philistines said the magic words, Jonathan knew it's on. And he says to the armor bearer, come on, let's go. The Lord's going to be with us. This is the most important part of the faith step. The doing. The doing. James 1:22, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. You can say you trust God all day. The words are easy. But what about when the rubber has to meet the road? Some talk and prepare and talk and prepare and plan and pray and plan and pray, but never do anything. They have all kinds of meetings all the time, all kinds of conferences, getting together, talking about all the things that they might do or could do, but they don't do. Talking is fine. Planning and preparing, all good and well. Yes, of course, pray earnestly. Plan accordingly. But I promise you, all the prayer and planning and prep should be leading to something. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And those good works, guess what he wants to use them for? To point people to him. Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So again, Jonathan asked God for confirmation. But when he got it, that meant he now needed to take the actual steps of following through. This was go time. And the ruckus was getting louder and louder. And the rest of the folks finally decide, let's go see and what's going on, right? They get there in verse 20 to see Philistines killing each other, and they're all confused. They're like, wait, what? Why are Philistines killing each other off? Verse 21 helps us understand why that might be. Remember, there is an earthquake, so I'm sure they're startled, right? So they're already startled. Remember I told you about the deserters? The other deserters? Verse 21. We find out that there were Israelites that got so scared when the Philistine army gathered. Many deserted Israel. They deserted God, their king, their country. They left it entirely and went to the other side. They were deserters in the ultimate sense of betrayal. They were wearing Philistine armor. They were ready to fight for the Philistines against their own people. They probably thought, they reasoned that it had to be done. They thought, that's the only way that they could save their family in the face of such a grave threat. They went to the other side. No, they're cowards. This isn't noble. Turning on God and on God's people to save your own skin is not noble. This was the ultimate betrayal, ultimate slap to the face of God that these men did. But when some of these cowardly deserters see Jonathan, the son of their king, fighting with one other guy, taking 20 out by himself, and then the earth starts to shake, they knew God was there, and they turned back. In their Philistine gear, they start fighting the Philistines, motivated by Jonathan. Folks, there are some that are waiting to see others do it first. There are some that don't have the courage to take those steps, to go do, that are waiting for someone else to do it. And God is so gracious, he's so kind and merciful that when they see it and then they get on board, God lets them reap in the reward too. In the midst of this earthquake, Philistine soldiers that are actually Israelites start killing other Philistine soldiers. So now the Philistines are confused, thinking, they're not looking at the faces of the people and thinking like, all they see is they see the earth is shaken. They see somebody wearing their colors, if you will, wearing their armor, who's attacking their friends. And they're like, wait, what's going on? Who's friend? Who's foe? What is going on? There's confusion everywhere. The regular Philistine soldiers, now they see Saul and his men approaching. And as Saul and his men approaching, they're like, what the heck is going on? They don't know what's going on yet. All they knew is 2 people were missing from their roll call. But then they see Philistines fighting each other and don't fully understand it till they get closer. Verse 22, the Israelites that were hiding in the hills and the holes and the rocks and the caves, guess what they did in verse 22? They found their courage. Again, I told you some people are waiting for others to do it. So they come out and they join them. Again, I don't want you to think these people were brave or honorable. I'm not going to bash them, but I'm not going to lift them up. These were the fearful. These were the cowardly. These were the unfaithful in Israel. When the going got tough, they got going. These were the fearful that fled, and the unfaithful. You got the unfaithful that fled to the rocks and the caves, and you got the other ones that fled to the other side. Don't think much of them. Think much of God, who is so merciful, that has allowed them to come back after they lost their courage, lost their faith in him, deserted him and their king, the one that they swore to follow, by the way. Remember when he had all of Israel gathered? You're going to commit to this king that you asked me for, right? Yes, God. And guess what? They bounced on him when he needed them most. These are the type of people that look at you when you say you want to do something for God and they say, oh, that's stupid. That's crazy. That can't be done. You really want to do that? And when God does something, they come out of the woodworks, out of the hills and caves and say, oh, I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it all along. I want to be like, shut up. But I don't. I knew God was going to do something great through you. Oh, thank you. You're going to have people that criticize you and doubt God. And then if you're successful, they want to come in and get a piece of the glory. Don't get irritated. It's not worth it. Don't get frustrated with these people. God is already using you to humble them. Oh, and FYI, you'll always be criticized the most by those doing the least. You'll always be criticized the most by those that are doing the least. Popcorn is a cheap snack. It's much easier to sit and watch others do the work and then want to be a part of it later. Verse 23 sums it all up beautifully. The Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle pressed beyond Beth-Aven. Josephus, famous Jewish historian, says that there were 6,000 Philistines killed in that attack. Now, he came much later than this event, thousands of years later. So, we don't know. This was their oral tradition. Could have not. Just interesting. And all the groups of people that are present had a hand in the victory. There's multiple parties I want you to see as we close. We have the holdbacks, right? The ones that were sitting under the pomegranate tree, looking to each other, all afraid to do anything. The ones having all the meetings and the conferences. You have the sellouts, those who went to the enemy's side, that jumped back when Israel was suddenly winning. And then you had the hideouts, those whose fear got the best of them, and they left and literally hid until the odds looked better. But there was no doubt who led the battle. The boldly trusting Jonathan. Now ask yourself, where do you find yourself in all of this? From my perspective, I've told you, I see armor bearers. In secret, between you and God, which of these groups are you most like? That's between you and him. From my perspective, I see heroes. But one thing we all have to make sure that we're doing is that we're the same person here as we are at work, as we are at the family gathering, as we are when we're out and about. We got to be that same person. And if that's what you're doing, if that's who you are, know that I'm incredibly proud of you. I read this passage, and again, I see a bunch of people that are willing to say, let's go. And it means a lot. And it's the only reason we're still going. Despite what it looks like. God can. God will. Corporately and individually. Let's go before him now in prayer with some of those things.